two British rogues and comrades in arms risk their lives to become kings and loot the Afghan region of Kafiristan. That's the premise of John Huston's 1975 film, The Man Who Would Be King, based on the novella of the same name by Rudyard Kipling. That's the movie we'll be looking at today on Movie Bones. Hello, and welcome to Movie Bones, the podcast that uncovers movies from before the modern age of blockbusters. My name's Justin Miller, and my co-host here is Ryan.
Hi. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So the point of the podcast is we take movies apart that were made before we were born, and we go over them, look at them with fresh eyes, and see what we think of them, and want to share that with you, the listening audience. So having said that, this week's movie is The Man Who Would Be King. And I have seen this movie a total of once before, and I think you said, Ryan, that you hadn't seen it before, right?
I have not, no.
So the premise of the movie is, you got these two guys, they're pretty much rogues and scoundrels, and they decide they're going to make a contract and go off and become kings of this part of Afghanistan called Kafiristan, which I actually looked up. It's the historical name for something is named something else right now in Afghanistan. It got me thinking, it's like, what would you do? What would be the country I would want to, like if I was going to set myself up as a king somewhere? I don't think it would be in Afghanistan. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I absolutely know what you mean. And that's, I kind of think I probably thought that at least once because, like, I did my due diligence. I'll say that. And I watched that movie. But I decided, knowing that today was when we were going to record this, I was like, all right, that's my first thing I did this morning was I watched this movie. And yeah, that was one of the things I thought about, like, where would I want to be? One thing that I realized is, like, I don't know, maybe it's because of the weather outside right now, but I would prefer being somewhere, and I know this is going to sound strange to some people, I'd prefer to be somewhere cold.
Really?
I just want to make that very clear. I would prefer to be somewhere cold because I'm watching all these people in that film, and there's at one point I'm like, it has got to be miserable.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, some of the terrain they had to cover. And by the way, the cinematography in this movie is absolutely stunning. They actually look like they went to these places.
Oh, yeah.
And but it looks really inhospitable. I think that for me, though, I think the place that I would pick, well, it's kind of cliche, but I think I'd go to Hawaii, Same temperature every day, it's like just live the life of luxury, right? If that's the goal, right? But these guys, they pick Afghanistan. This was made probably before the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. And since then, the American presence in Afghanistan, and it didn't go exactly entirely well either. So there's this historical baggage that's happened in between. It's like, yeah, who wants to go to Afghanistan? The whole movie is about, them trying to become kings. It's like, okay. And one of the interesting things I noticed about the movie is that, unlike a lot of other movies, a lot of the stuff just goes their way, right? In a lot of other movies, the protagonists will come up against a challenge. They'll suffer some kind of defeat, and then they'll have to get past that before they can move on. But here, it's like whenever there's a difficulty or a struggle, it's like something always comes in to make it easier for them. And that's kind of plays into the story's theme, which is unusual, Did you notice that too?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I do think the movie does a really good job of, in its own way, spelling that out, like especially towards the end there.
Yes.
When I want to make this very clear to the audience that ever hears this. I am terrible with names, although I will say the names are very iconic names. I love the fact that Michael Caine's name in that movie is Peachy.
Peachy.
It is something I'm never going to forget. It's Peachy, and Sean Connery's, his name is Danny, right?
Danny, yeah. Danny Dravitt.
Yeah, but Danny and Peachy.
Yeah, Danny and Peachy.
But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like Peachy's character, as the movie is going on, and as everything kind of starts, I would say, in a sense, falling apart. Well, it does fall apart, obviously. But as it all starts falling apart, that's kind of what he's trying to tell Danny, is that, hey, look, we've had a good run. Everything has gone well. we need to get out before it all falls down. Like, go now while the getting is good.
He had some sense still in him that he could recognize, that's the thing about it is like, they're both scoundrels, but and then in the beginning, they both kind of just realize and accept that they're scoundrels, right? But it isn't until he starts to believe his own press, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, I've had all these people kind of bowing down and worshiping me. It's like, now I feel this weird sense of responsibility, although I don't think it's quite that what he's feeling. I don't think he's feeling responsibility. But nevertheless, but Peachy never changes himself, really. He always knows, I'm a scoundrel and we are here for nefarious purposes, for our own self-interest. And that actually is kind of what, if Danny just listened to him, that's what ends up turning the screw that makes everything unravel, right? And I thought that was really great. It's like, but even then, when things have gone bad and it's like Danny asks for forgiveness and it's like, oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
The director, I think, John Huston, I think he wanted originally Clark Gable and Humphrey Bogart to play the leads. And I thought that was interesting.
I went and read when you said, or when you sent the notes and saying, like, these are the people that might have been in the movie. All right, I'm gonna read the people that you said. Mm-hmm. Clark Gable, these are duos. So it's good people. These are the duos of people. So I don't know if there'd be any other kind of mix and matching here. These are the people he had envisioned being together in this movie. The first one was Clark Gable and Humphrey Bogart. The only reason why that did not happen was because he could not get the film off the ground before Humphrey Bogart passed away in 1957, because he had this idea in 1950.
Right.
Others that were considered were Bruce Lancaster and Kirk Douglas, Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole, and then Robert Redford and Paul Newman. I don't know personally if I could say this, just because Sean Connery and Michael Caine worked so well together.
Yeah.
But I do think the only other two people that I would have liked to see in this movie, and these are all fantastic actors. I want to make that clear. The only other two people that I would have wanted to see this movie would have been Clark Gable and Humphrey Bogart.
Okay, interesting.
And that's because I've recently watched more of their films, and they're as good as any list says they are.
Yes.
But at the same time, I don't know. There's something about, I want to call them enigmas. The enigmas of Michael Caine and Sean Connery that just hit this thing out of the park.
Oh, yeah. You never doubt their characters for who they are. They completely sell you on that. And for my money, it's like of all those names mentioned, I could probably say only Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole. And that's pretty much because I've seen more Peter O'Toole. And I haven't seen much of Richard Burton. But Peter O'Toole, I thought, in the Peachy role, that would have been really good. At least as good. I could say at least as good. The others, I think that the last pairing that he approached before he got to Sean Connery and Michael Caine was the Robert Redford and Paul Newman combination. And those guys actually were the ones responsible for Michael Caine and Connery getting cast, because they actually said, there are British actors who should be doing this, because the original story does take place in British-occupied India, right? It was on their recommendation that the final cast got made. They couldn't have done it any better, put it that way.
No, in fact, actually, I want to say I read that the girl who played Roxanne, who, fun fact, is actually also Michael Caine's wife now.
Oh, really? That part I did not know.
Yeah, but the girl who played Roxanne, I want to say that when the movie first came out, she didn't actually have a credit in that sense. I think it might have, I don't even know if it said her name. I think it just was girl or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she didn't have much of a role to play, but that's interesting to know that Michael Caine actually ended up marrying her. And I don't know. Yeah.
That might have been why she got the role. And I'm not in a nepotism way, but she was a model, or is a model. She's still alive. But was a model in that time, very small, low key actress.
Yeah.
And everything. Most of her, she only had 4 or 5 parts. I'm going to disclaimer this. I looked on Wikipedia to find this thing out. But she only had like 4 or 5 different roles, and most of her roles were just like person. And when I say that, I mean like, no name, like just an extra or something like that.
Right.
But, when she was a model, apparently Michael Caine, fell in love with her at some point and then tracked her down. They started dating, got married.
That's real neat. Like you said, it's probably the most high-profile job she had. I was thinking of the irony of Sean Connery as part of his character to having to take a pledge against women and drink. Just a few, 4 years after playing James Bond for how many films, I thought that was really ironic too. Speaking of that vow, by the way, that they make, it's almost like the contract they signed, promising each other their assistance and against women and drink. It's like the moment that's broken is when everything comes apart. When he decides to take a wife, and he comes up with an excuse too. He's like, yeah, but that was before we became kings. Now we're kings and the contract doesn't matter anymore. But that's when things go apart, right? And it's because of that too. You've got all these people who are adoring you for reasons you've never actually had much of a hand in, actually. As we talked about before, it's pure luck that they actually got to be kings.
I think that when it comes to this story, everyone's heard this phrase before. There's nothing new under the sun and everything, which I think that's a neat thing. It can be sometimes a little bit terrifying, but at the same time, it's an interesting thought. And the reason why I say that is because, when you think about the story of this movie, you have these 2 characters who want to make life more than what it has been for them. They're disillusioned by Britain. It's their catalyst to their journey is they want to make life more for themselves, and they know they can't in the rules that they're given.
Right.
So they go about and do that, or they go and do that and everything, and it works for them. But what happens as the movie goes on? Well, Sean Connery's character Danny, he becomes more and more enthralled by the power. He's not even, and that's the thing too, he's not a bad leader. There's part of him wants to ask the priest characters, weren't things good as well? He was making things right. He was helping everyone out. He stopped they stopped all the fighting. They were together for once, but it's this one thing that we just can't handle that. And I understand why they can't handle it, but it's like, what does that, what does that mean? Is it okay?
I think for me, what kind of indicated to my mind that Danny isn't exactly, that he's doing it kind of, it's still more for his own attention for me, is the moment that she bites him and he bleeds. And his first reaction to that was like, the whore bit me, or I forget exactly what she bit me.
That's what he said.
He really put her down. It's like,
yeah. And
it's like, yeah, I don't think the virtue settled in. If there was any virtue at all, I think it was fairly on the surface because it wasn't very deep.
Yeah.
But to his credit, and this is where I love, the film could have been worse at this point, and I think it took a good turn, like that Peachy turns around and he forgives him when they were encircled, all because of Danny, right? It's all his. He's the one who caused the breakdown. But Peachy forgives him in that last moment. Well, it's like, well, yeah, these guys started the movie as friends and they're going to end the movie as friends. And man, does Peachy ever pay for his crimes too, though? Yeah. Boy, did he ever pay for it. They crucified poor Peachy.
And then they said it was a miracle that he survived the next day, which you'd almost sit there and think, after that happens, and after you found that out anyways, you're sitting there thinking it's a little bit surprised they just didn't keep you around as some kind of holy figure. I mean,
it's funny you should mention that because I took the opportunity upon myself to not read the whole novella, but just read the final bits, the final conclusion of the story, because it's free. You can look it up. It's out there. It's public domain. Apparently, after being taken down, they feed him in the temple and then send him on his way. The reason why they give him for the kindness they're giving him is the fact that he survived and he was more of a god, not a god, but more of a god than Danny was. just because even though he bled, he still did something that was a little bit miraculous. But they didn't think he was a god because they still kick him out into the snow. But that was a little tidbit from the novella that I picked up on.
But I get that, because for his sake, and maybe if like the movie had like 30 more minutes tacked onto it, it would have been something that would have been more explored. But for his sake, he never lied to the people. I mean, he was a participant in a lie. He let a lie continue on. So in that sense, he did lie to the people. But like for him himself, he never made himself out to be a god. He never made himself out to be more than he was. I'm going to circle back to the point that I was trying to make earlier when I said that there's nothing new under the sun. One of the things I found interesting about movies like this, and there's not a direct correlation. I want to make that very clear. But when I was thinking about this movie, I was first thinking about in the future. And you know what this movie reminds me of?
What's that?
In the future, a future movie that would come out, not like in our future, but after this movie comes out, it reminds me of The Road to El Dorado. It's a very similar setup. You have two scoundrels. They come upon this city. They're trying to make a fortune for themselves. They found the city of gold. And in the midst of their travels, they are looked at like gods. And you have that priest character who he's evil. I wouldn't make the priest character in this movie in The Man Who Would Be King. I wouldn't make him evil, because I think he's looking out for his people genuinely, which is fine. But in The Road to El Dorado, they both become gods, or they're both looked at as gods. One of them is like, hey, this is going too far. The other one has fallen in love with one of the citizens in that movie.
Yep.
And he's like, no, we got to stay. And then, there's that departure. Now, the movie, that story ends much differently because it's a cartoon, for one. Yeah. That movie ends much differently and everything. But it's a similar movie. And I actually looked it up. I was like, was this on purpose? And so far, I've not been able to find anything that says the movie. But what both of those stories are is it's almost like a retelling of the myth of, oh my gosh, I don't want to say his name wrong. Ithacus. Is it Ithacus?
Is it the one who flew too close to the sun? Icarus. That's right. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what this is. It's a retelling of that story, because in this movie, or in the Man Who Would Be King, that's what continuously happens. And you have the character who is like Icarus's father. In this movie, it's Peachy. Peachy's telling Danny, you are getting too close to the sun, and if you do not stop, your wing's going to burn up. And the whole way, Danny, who is the representation of Icarus, is saying to him, no, that's not happening. That's not what's going on. I will be fine. I will be the one that is able to overcome this. Like every other time before, the wings burn up, and he, again, metaphorically and literally, falls out of grace and falls to his death.
And what a scene that was! Yeah,
it was really interesting. Powerful scene. I did not expect that to be his death. I'm going to be honest with you, but that is what it was.
Did you perchance also notice the maybe not so subtle use of foreshadowing in throughout the story involving heads? First with polo, they're playing polo with the heads. And
that's what I thought was going to happen. I want to say something. For a movie that came out in 1975, and I know at that time there's different types of horror movies out and everything, but this movie that sets itself up as an adventure film, it sets itself up as a comedy at many times. It's very much a comedy. To show the head at the end, I thought, and even if it was completely deformed and not the way it looked before, so it doesn't look like Sean Connery, I want to make that clear. But to show the head, I was sitting there thinking to myself, that's a pretty powerful thing to do, kind of a powerful statement, and, part of me thinks pretty groundbreaking for that world at that time.
I would agree on that, yeah. It does a great job of bringing home its themes in an image, I would have to say. And I'm almost reminded of, there's a quote, I forget who said it. What was it? Heavy is the head that bears the crown, or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the quote.
Yeah, I don't know who said it, and I want to look it up now because I want to watch it be Kipling himself. But it probably wasn't. But it did make me think very strongly of that. And it is a very gruesome image to leave an otherwise, like I said, a very balanced tale, and certainly one I could recommend to most audiences. Next week, guys, our film will be Roman Holiday, and with Audrey Hepburn. And was it Cary Grant?
Nope. It's shouldn't have asked me his name, but he's the guy that played in he's the guy in To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh man, you're gonna make me. I'm gonna brain fart now.
Don't worry, everyone.
Okay.
I'll tell you.
Yes, Ryan will do it. He's really great at finding stuff on the spot.
I have the power of the internet on my side.
Do.
Gregory Peck.
There you go. Fantastic. Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn. So for our listeners out there, if you're enjoying our shared journey into older films, feel free to follow us on your preferred podcast app and tune in again next week. Until then, have a great one.